Hey guys, welcome back to MichowaCrochet, and I'm Bree. Past couple of weeks have been kind of crazy and I haven't posted between new issues with the neighbors and I was sick last week. It's been a little crazy, but I'm glad to be back and I want to talk with you about 5 crochet skills that I found hard to learn, and I'm going to give you some resources in the description this week so that if these are things you struggle with, maybe you can become a master of these skills. So, but without further ado, let's get into it. One thing I think we can all agree upon is crochet is hard from time to time to learn. It might be you have a hard time, getting gauge, or you might have a hard time learning a certain stitch or skill. It can be hard from time to time. And for me, I've been thinking back about the main things that are really hard for me to learn right off the bat, when I was first learning to crochet. And I thought, might be kind of fun to share that with you. In general, I had a very hard time learning to crochet. My grandma tried for years and years to teach me to knit. I couldn't figure that out. And crochet, I thought was just more interesting. I heard it was a lot faster. And because I'm not a very patient person, that was more appealing to me. When learning a new skill, you have to take into consideration what kind of learner you are. For me, I am a visual, I want to see somebody doing it while I'm doing it, and I'm a slow learner. So I'm not somebody you're going to be okay, do this chain, stick your hook here, and get to the end of the row. I need to see all the things slowly laid out, and I have to see it. I tried for a very long time to learn it with books, learning from words and pictures and diagrams, and that just wasn't my thing. Eventually, I went on YouTube, and that was hard too, because the first, probably 5 or 6 people I tried to learn from on YouTube, I didn't connect with them. I didn't understand what they were trying to say to me. I didn't understand where they're telling me to put the hook, and I just that even was a challenge. It really did not click for me until I found Mikey from the Crochet Crowd. And he took the time to really break things down in very little bites that were a lot more easy for my brain to digest. He took the time to show you a couple different ways to hold your hook. He took the time to, talk about different kinds of hooks so you could pick the best thing for you. And I mean, he just did such a good job and broke it down in a way that I could really understand. Now, am I saying that he's going to be the best for you? No. I'm saying he was the best for me, and I highly recommend you check out his videos. But you have to find somebody who you really connect with and can understand what they're saying. And you click with them and you get it. So for me, I'm very grateful, and I credit, Mikey from the Crochet Crowd with teaching me to crochet. I mean, yes, I'm kind of self-taught because I had to figure it out on my own, but it was the way he presented it to me and how he showed it through YouTube on how to crochet that made it finally click for me, and I was able to do it. And I will be forever grateful, because crochet has become the one thing in life that has been consistent and I'm passionate about. I mean, there's things I've loved in the past, and it's a hyperfixation. I love it, I'm crazy about it, and then eventually I move on. But not crochet. Crochet for me is here to stay. So without further ado, let's get into the 5 things. Number 5 is gauge. For me, I didn't understand the importance of a gauge swatch, and I didn't really at first understand the idea that just because your stitches are consistent, and your tension is consistent, I thought once your stitches were consistent, then that was it. You could make anything and it was all the same. No, it's not. And the first time I went to make a hat, I realized that real quick, because if you go to crochet a hat, and just because your stitches are all consistently the same time and the same, tightness, doesn't mean that hat is going to be the size it's supposed to be. So gauge is so important, and we all know that most of us skip the gauge swatches, even though we know they're important. But actually mastering gauge and understanding how gauge works is so important to anytime you want to make something that has to fit, like sweaters, hats, gloves. you know, any of those type of things. Also, I mean, it's important too because, I mean, if you don't have the right gauge for like something like an amigurumi, you might have stuffing that's coming out, or your stitches might be way too tight and, you know, it doesn't come out quite the right shape. So mastering gauge is very important. Number 4, there is a difference between US terms and UK terms. And I didn't understand this at first, and I got this book I was super excited about, and to make like crochet taxidermy animal heads. And when I got it, I could not figure out why, like, you could see right through, like, through the piece I just crocheted, you could see all the stuffing. Like, I just couldn't figure that out, and I kept thinking there was something wrong with like my crocheting. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? It took me like, because this was like early when I didn't understand that, and I didn't know until later that no, there's a difference in a double crochet in US terms and a double crochet in UK terms are very different. And like, I had to learn that the hard way. So it's one of those things where I do not have them memorized, but I know that if I'm working on a pattern and it's in UK terms, I typically will have like a little printout of like the conversions from what a double crochet is, you know, in one and what a double crochet is in the other, so that I can go ahead and get my stitches correct. So that's something that was kind of a little hard to figure out. I mean, not hard to figure out in terms of like I couldn't find the information, because the information is out there for sure. But it was hard for me because my brain was really set on, well, if I see DC on a page, this is how I'm supposed to make it. And it's not. So that takes a little extra brain power, and you just have to have the knowledge to know that this pattern is not in US terms. Number 3, diagrams. Now, diagrams are like one of those things where I see a lot of people complain about, you know, they don't know how to read a diagram, or they don't like diagrams, they don't understand them. I think it's a great skill to learn, because if you're going ahead and you're doing a pattern by, you know, a pattern designer that you've never done any of their patterns, sometimes the way that people say things and how it processes in your brain are 2 different things. Because sometimes when you're working with a new pattern, you'll get to the end of the row and you're like, well, I have 5 more stitches to go. And you're like, you know, where are these 5 stitches supposed to go? Because I'm at the end of the row. If you have a diagram, you can see exactly where you're supposed to stick the next stitch. Like, you can look at, you know, row 1, and then when you look at row 2, you can see this is where the stitch goes. And I just think that that's such a great skill. And it's also one of those things where, you know, you could get a better understanding of how like a pattern comes together. So like if you wanted to make a little tweak here, or if you want to design your own patterns, diagrams are such a good skill to understand. So I highly recommend, if you don't understand diagrams, you don't think they're important, I highly recommend though checking it out and having just even a general knowledge of how diagrams work. You don't have to have every symbol memorized, but just understanding the basics of how a diagram works is such a useful skill when you're working on patterns. Especially if you're doing some kind of like lace work or anything like that, you can see exactly where you're supposed to be sticking your hook. And like where to stick your hook, I think, is where most people get hung up, because it's very confusing sometimes. Because sometimes you're going in the front, sometimes you're going in the back, sometimes it's one loop or another loop, or it's a third loop. It can be very confusing, and a diagram really will help you figure out those things. I mean, if there's a stitch I don't understand, if there's a diagram I can actually go look at, and I can see where I'm supposed to be putting that stitch or how it's supposed to stack up. It's so helpful. So I'm really big on diagrams, and it's something I'm glad that I understand now. My number 2 thing is color work. I found color work kind of hard at first, because there's a lot more that goes into it than just switching colors. Like when you switch those colors, what are you doing with those ends? Are they gonna just, you know, are they just gonna hang out the back? Are you gonna pick up that color when you come back, you know, when you do your row back through? Like, what do you do with that? And like, how do you make like the color transition seamless? Like, so there isn't like this muddling of colors. There's a lot that goes into color work, and you know, it's not super hard to master, but it is something that takes a little time, it takes a little skill, it takes some practice to get your colors transitioning well so they're not muddled and that you don't have ends showing. It's worth taking the time. And like, I recently bought like a Colorwork masterclass, and I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to that. There will be in the description, I'm going to have resources for all 5, but this one's like a major one for me because I think that the Colorwork course that Marley Bird put out is like bee's knees, top notch. There's so much I've learned, even though I've been crocheting for years, and that will be down in the description. All right, now we are on to my number 1 thing that it's taken me a long time to master, and I don't think I've still quite mastered this one, but it's a great skill to have. Foundation stitches. Now, if you have already mastered that, I think that's awesome, and I'm a little jealous. But if you haven't mastered foundation stitches yet, they are so much better than just making a chain and crocheting across the chain, because with foundation stitches, they actually have the stretch like the rest of your project will. For instance, like if you were making a sweater, and if the very bottom row, let's say you're making from, bottom up sweater, and if that bottom row is like made with chains and it's stiff, like when you go to pull that sweater on and off, like there's not going to be any stretch if you just make it with normal like chains and stitches. But if you made that with foundation stitches, then it's going to have the same stretch that the rest of the project's going to have. And I found too, as time goes on and you wear your sweater or whatever, like it, all the parts stretch except for those edges. If those edges don't stretch, then eventually your sweater doesn't look so good anymore because it's starting to look sloppy because you've got this real stiff, you got this real stiff row at the bottom, and then everything else is flowy and stretchy, and over time, crochet stretches over time. It doesn't look so good. So being able to use foundation stitches to start something like that is a game changer. And I personally struggle a bit with foundation stitches. Like every time I have to use them, I have to look it back up at how to do it, because it's one of those skills for some reason my brain just has not memorized. But I mean, I'm still able to do it. I just have to look it up to remind my brain how to do it. I need to use them more. Maybe that's what it is. I don't feel like I definitely haven't mastered that skill yet, but I definitely recommend, if you can master it, to do so. Or if you are like me and you can't quite seem to master that one for some reason, take the time to look it up. Don't just go for the chain. At least give it a try. Now, if you end up having it, just have a, crochet out a regular chain, regular, set of stitches across for your first row, that's fine. I mean, I'm not judging you. I just think if you have that skill and you can use it, I think it just elevates things a little bit. And I'm not going to tell you to, just totally ditch your regular way of doing it, because ultimately crochet is a journey, and each journey is different. Like for me, that's just one of those things I haven't mastered, but I mean, it's part of my journey. Eventually I probably will. The main thing I want you to take away though from this video is, we can always learn something new, we can always improve, and it's a journey and a struggle for everybody in one way or another. I have not met anybody who is like, oh yeah, I just picked up the hook, the yarn, and went at it, and everything's easy. I mean, I would love to meet that person, because I would just love to know more about how their brain works and how they could just do it. It's all a learning process, and we're all still learning. No matter where you are in your crochet journey, there's always something you're learning, like a new way to weave in ends that holds a little bit more secure and creates less bulk. I mean, you might be learning new stitches. There's always something fun to learn, and there's always something you can always be better at. And that's the best thing about crochet, is it's a journey with an end goal of happiness and enjoyment. That's what the end goal should be. And I mean, you should be, if you're not enjoying it, you're not loving it, the journey, then crochet probably isn't for you. It's just, not trying to be, nasty with that. It's just, it's the fact. It should be something enjoyable. It shouldn't be a chore. And you should, you should want to learn more, and you should want to, master things. And I mean, whatever level you end up landing on, maybe you hit a certain point and you're like, this is good for me. I think that's good too. I mean, it doesn't mean you're at the end of your journey, because, stitching in general is just a journey. Stitching in general is a journey. And it's always taking us somewhere. I would love to hear from you. Tell me something that you're learning to master, like maybe something you're working on, or maybe tell me a skill you have mastered that it took you a long time to master. Like, we can all learn new things and tips and tricks from each other, and I would love to hear if you've got something to share about something, either you're working on, or a skill that you took a long time to work on, and maybe a resource that you use, because I'm always open to learning new things when it comes to crochet. And well, I hope everybody here can relate to wanting to learn and master, and everybody is on a journey of crochet and is having a good time. So until next week, take care.